Brazil is the most highly accomplished footballing nation of all time, with 5 World Cups won, multiple other trophies, and many legends of the game such as Pelé, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Zico, Romário, Kaká, the list goes on. However, for anyone that follows this sport closely, knows that it hasn't been this way for the Seleção Brasileira in quite some time. Over 20 years without winning a World Cup, a humiliating 7-1 loss at home to Germany back in 2014 during the semifinals, 2 consecutive quarterfinal exits in 2018 and 2022, a team that flopped in the 2024 Copa America, and hasn't really done well in the current CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying. We all know that Joga Bonito is dead, and as much as we wanted it to still be alive, it has been dead for decades, thanks to the robotic players and systems developed by Europeans and their influence in the global game. But that's for another video. Now, is Brazil actually in trouble, or is all of this just an overreaction? And we know that Brazil is actually struggling. Why are they even struggling? Hello, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Chapéu Football, where you are going to find the best coverage of Brazilian soccer or Brazilian football in English on YouTube. So you better be subscribed by now. Today we're gonna go through what is wrong with the Seleção Brasileira, the actual issues. And I know many are gonna say CBF, which is the Brazilian Federation. And yes, the main issues, the source is CBF. But for this video, I want to dive into more specifics of the actual team and its current situation. At the end, I'm going to give you my final thoughts and the reason why I'm actually not that concerned for Brazil in the 2026 World Cup. Now, make sure you're subscribed. We have been growing very fast, and many of you are not subscribed. And if you're not subscribed and you didn't hit the like button in this video already, you're a loser. Do not be a loser. Also, let me know in the comment section down below, what is the current biggest issue with the Brazilian national team? All right, roll the episode. First and foremost, let's talk about the current situation. Then we can talk about the actual issues. Brazil has not won a World Cup since 2002. And that may sound bad for Brazil's standards. It's actually not as alarming as it may seem. Brazil won 3 out of 4 World Cups from 1958 to 1970 during the Pelé era. And then they went on a 24-year World Cup drought where Brazil would not win a World Cup again till 1994, led by Romário in the United States of America. So the whole Brazil hasn't won a World Cup since 2002 narrative is blown out of proportion. Brazil has had that happen to them in the past, where they didn't win a World Cup for 24 years. And again, when you take into account that the World Cup is only played every 4 years, you see that that is not as bad as it sounds. Sure, maybe Brazil should have won at least 1 World Cup during this time, but it's not that alarming. There are worse issues. Also, during that time, between 2002 and 2025, Brazil did manage to win 3 Copa Americas, 2 Olympic gold medals, and 3 Confederations Cups. So it hasn't been a complete disaster, even though ultimately the World Cup is what actually matters. With that said, let's talk about the now, because what's happening now to Brazil is quite concerning and alarming. And it's mainly this World Cup cycle to the 2026 World Cup. Brazil came into the 2022 World Cup as a top 3 nation in the world. They were one of the favorites to win the World Cup. But ever since they lost to Croatia with that lucky Croatian goal, it's been all downhill since. So Brazil started this cycle for the 2026 World Cup with Ramon Menezes as the interim head coach. And this guy is a complete imbecile. He's one of the worst coaches I've ever seen in my life. He called up Rony, that at the time played for Palmeiras, and gave him the 10 for the Brazilian national team. That on its own should be enough to put him in prison. I'm not even joking. So he took over after Chichi left, right? And then eventually we had Fernando Diniz coaching the national team and Fluminense, a club, at the same time. Obviously that failed. And then they brought in a mediocre coach called Dorival Jr. So as you can see, CBF, the federation, is a shit show ran by greedy imbeciles. We did an entire video talking about why Brazilian coaches are so bad, so you can check that out after this video. Yeah, it's literally the video prior to this one. So it's kind of important. If you don't understand why, go watch that. Now, in the summer of 2024, Brazil had an awful Copa America and ended up eliminated in the quarterfinals with a bunch of terrible performances. At the time of this recording, Brazil sits in 4th place in World Cup qualifying with CONMEBOL with 6 wins, 3 draws, and 5 losses in 14 games. They scored 20 goals and conceded 16. An awful campaign. For context right here, if you add up all the losses that Brazil had in World Cup qualifying from 2006, the 2006 World Cup, the 2010 World Cup, the 2018 World Cup, and the 2022 World Cup, you would see that they lost 5 games in 71 games played. This cycle, they have already lost 5 in 14. Isn't that crazy? The last World Cup qualifying cycle that we qualified to the 2022 World Cup, Brazil went undefeated in 17 games. Now, if you get the World Cup qualifying from 2006, 2010, 2018, and 2022, Brazil had the same amount of losses that they had just for this campaign in 14 games. And it's not even over. What's my point here? The problem is now. This cycle. These 20 years that we talked about, they weren't great, but they also weren't terrible. The now is horrendous. Brazil also lost 4-1 to Argentina in World Cup qualifying, which is their worst loss ever in the history of qualifying for Brazil. Lucky for them, they're not really at risk of missing out on the World Cup due to the expanded spots. 60% of CONMEBOL qualifies directly to the World Cup, otherwise Brazil would be at risk. To oversimplify, Brazil has looked like complete shit lately for Brazil's standards, despite still having incredible players. So why is Brazil so bad right now? Let's talk about the specific issues. Okay, so the issues. I know the source of all the problems is CBF, the Brazilian Federation. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the specific problems with the national team, the actual team. And problem number 1, I kind of touched upon it earlier in the video. It's coaching. So coaching is the most obvious one of them all. Even mentioning it kind of feels like beating a dead horse, or, you know, as they say in Brazil, chutar cachorro morto, which means to kick a dead dog. So in the US, I guess we kick a horse. In Brazil, they kick a dog, but they mean the same thing, to beat a dead horse. And the coaching issue is actually being addressed while this is being recorded. Mediocre Brazilian coach Dorival Jr. was fired after being in charge for a little over a year and accumulating many embarrassing performances and results, most recently a 4-1 loss to Argentina. So Dorival is gone, and that alone will help a lot as long as they hire a good coach. At the time of this recording, Portuguese coach Jorge Jesus is the favorite to take over the national team. In my opinion, that would be a good hire, even though personally, I have Carlo Ancelotti as my number 1. Whoever it is that they hire, Ancelotti, Jorge Jesus, or someone else, we will do a video breaking down that hire, why it's a good hire or why it's a bad hire, okay? When that happens, which should be sooner rather than later. I would say over the next 21 to 30 days. Now understand that having a foreign coach is no magic bullet, and it must be the right coach. It's not every single foreign coach that is better than Brazilian coaches. That is simply not true. I do know that most Brazilian coaches suck, with some rare exceptions, but once again, I'm gonna say it. Hiring a random foreign coach is not the solution. By right coach, I mean one that has the right style of play, ideas, leadership that the Seleção needs, along with a winning resume and proven track record of success. That's where CBF has to do their homework and find the right hire, and not just hire someone based on where they were born. Because Brazil actually has good enough players to compete for a World Cup trophy. So you're telling me that a team with Alisson, Marquinhos, Militão, Gabriel Magalhães, Bruno Guimarães, Vinicius Júnior, Rodrigo, Rafinha, possibly even Neymar coming back, and many others, can't be one of the best in the world? Of course they can. The problem is Brazil has expensive players and cheap coaches. So it's time to get a good coach. Brazilian coaches are mostly arrogant and outdated. There's a lack of professionalism there as well. So now let's go into the specifics of this, because I just mentioned the coaching, but what do they have to fix? Blaming the terrible coach is accurate, but far too obvious. So what I'm gonna do right now is essentially tackle 3 issues that the coach or the new coach has to fix. Probably the first thing that a new coach will have to address, or an issue they will have to fix, is Brazil's defense that has been complete shit lately. Now look, I'm not a big fan of Chichi as a coach, but credit where it's due. That guy knows and knew how to organize a defensive structure. He used to be a big-time retranqueiro, which in Brazil it just means a park-the-bus merchant, a very defensive-oriented coach, even though he wasn't really like that or wasn't too bad with that when it came to Brazil or even Flamengo recently. But his positional play tactics would very often kill the fluidity of the team and make Brazil seem very pragmatic, but rock solid defensively. So I talked about the 5 losses in this World Cup qualifying campaign for Brazil, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. Brazil's Swiss cheese defense, full of holes, leaking goals left and right. In the 2018 World Cup qualifying campaign, Brazil conceded 11 goals in 18 games. While in the World Cup qualifying for 2022, Brazil conceded only 5 goals in 17 games. So far, in this World Cup qualifying cycle, Brazil has allowed 16 goals in 14 games. So that is around 1.14 goals per game. With Chichi, in World Cup qualifying, Brazil allowed an average of 0.45 goals per game. Do you see the difference? Now we are allowing 1.14 goals per game. With Chichi, in 2 World Cup qualifying cycles, so more games, we have more data, we were conceding 0.45 goals per game, less than half. What's my point here? The defense right now, that used to be Brazil's strength the past 8 years, is complete shit. Despite Brazil having good center backs and goalkeepers right now, Brazil has the worst defense out of the top 6 teams in World Cup qualifying right now, which are the 6 teams that qualify directly to the World Cup. Now, why is this happening? I have theories. One of them is that Brazil never really found someone to truly replace Casemiro that was fantastic protecting the back line. 2, there's a lack of leadership. They might be missing players like Thiago Silva maybe from the past. I don't know. The other one is poor tactical organization of the back line and the double pivot in front of them, which is where Casemiro would probably be. And that's probably where the coach comes in. Brazil has quality players. These should all be easy fixes for any competent coach. Now you may be saying, what about the offense? This team is scoring far less goals than previous campaigns, which is true, you're not wrong. But that's not a major concern at the moment. Brazil still has the 2nd most goals out of any team in CONMEBOL and World Cup qualifying, only behind Argentina. So the defense is one of the worst, but the offense is still the 2nd best. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's not that alarming. And trust me, fixing the defense will make Brazil score more goals. I know this may sound crazy, but if Brazil's back line is stronger and well organized, the offense will score more goals as well. Call me crazy all you want, but trust me, that's how it works. The other issue that the new coach will have to address is the fact that Brazil's superstar players, these world-class players that they have, they simply don't step up like Neymar used to. And I understand. Vinicius, Rodrigo, Rafinha, Savinho, whoever you call, whoever you name, they are not better than prime Neymar. But still, none of these guys ever step up when you need them. Neymar has been dealing with injuries for what? Almost 2 years? So let me ask you one question. Who has stepped up since? It's been like 2 years. Vinicius Jr.? Well, he has 6 goals and 6 assists in 39 games with the Brazilian jersey. The dude has more shit performances for Brazil than goals. For context, Lamine Yamal has 4 goals and 9 assists for Spain in just 19 games, and the kid is 17. Now what about Rodrigo? A good player, but simply not good enough to carry Brazil. Rafinha, that's another good name. Well, he has been better than Vinicius and Rodrigo for Brazil, but he still hasn't been outstanding. The jersey for these guys is way too heavy. The light is too bright. A lot of these players seem to be lost without Neymar, which is quite concerning. They show no personality in them to step up. And you may be wondering, how will a new coach resolve this? I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have the answers to everything. I don't know how they would solve this. And you know, maybe Neymar just gets healthy and comes back in good form for Brazil, then boom, problem solved. But let's say Neymar doesn't, then what? That brings us to issue number 4, which without Neymar, it's been exposed and has to be fixed with a new coach. Which the issue is, the current Brazilian national team has no personality, but most importantly, no identity. When you watch the current Argentina play with or without Lionel Messi, they have an identity. You know exactly how they will play. Let's also talk about Spain. They have a clear identity. You know how they play. These are two of the best national teams in the world right now, and no matter how much you know about them and how they will face you, you still can't beat them. Under Tite, Brazil had an identity. You could clearly see a strong backline, strong defense, possession-based team capable of easily changing the tempo and striking at the right time. A very intense team built around positional play that also looked a bit pragmatic at times. I'm looking at Brazil during the 2022 World Cup, and I know they fell short, but that team played with confidence, and the opponents were afraid to play Brazil. Again, I'm not a fan of Tite, and I don't want him back. He failed, but he did show us that this team can be ultra competitive. So let me ask you one question. The current Brazilian national team, what is their identity? Besides being shit. Being shit is their current identity. But jokes aside, what is the style of play of this team? What is the identity? When they're playing, what do you see? Seriously, what are we? A pressing team? Possession-based team? Sit back and counter? What is the identity of this team right now? Joga Bonito died, and it seems like Brazil died with it. But that's not 100% true. Again, it all comes down to hiring the right coach. That can change the culture of this team and impact almost everything that I just mentioned. A new good coach will implement his system, his beliefs, his leadership, and if he's the right hire, I have zero concerns about Brazil being the dominant team they're meant to be. And if you made it this far in the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, as we appreciate it quite a bit. Now, before we end this video, before we wrap things up, let me give you my final thoughts and why I'm not concerned. Okay, so the first thing, Brazil fired Dorival, so they recognize that it was a mistake to hire him, and they're probably gonna get Jorge Jesus or Carlo Ancelotti. Either hire will probably be a good hire. We'll make a whole video about that. Now, another thing, Brazil didn't win a World Cup from 1970 to 1994. And another coincidence for you, those two World Cups are 24 years apart. 2002 and 2026 are also 24 years apart. 1994 was played in the United States. 2026 will also be played in the United States. So if you're superstitious, or just a little stitious, as Michael Scott would say, Brazil might win the 2026 World Cup. Now, look, the way things are right now, it seems very unlikely. But understand that every single short-term issue that Brazil currently has can literally be fixed within a month or two by simply hiring the best coach, hiring the best possible coach. The long-term issues have to be addressed by CBF, so those will still be there, and we'll talk about that in a separate video. But once again, defensive issues, identity, culture, players stepping up. If you hire the right coach like Jorge Jesus or Carlo Ancelotti, all of that could get fixed super quick. And if it's fixed based on the players Brazil has, Brazil most certainly is a candidate to win the 2026 World Cup. They have the talent, and I'm gonna say it right now. I'm saying this in April of 2025. Brazil will arrive in the 2026 World Cup with a lot of people skeptical of them, which is what happened in 2002, for example, where Brazil struggled to qualify to that World Cup. And Brazil will be a candidate to win the 2026 World Cup, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did so. Many of you are gonna call me delusional, but I'm telling you right now, this will happen, and Brazil actually will have a very successful World Cup next year. I wanna thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to drop a like before you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, send us video suggestions. We're open, we listen to you. This is a democracy right here. And that's all for today. I wanna thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.